You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your PMP certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Building shared understanding is about creating a common, testable agreement on what the project is trying to achieve, how success will be measured, and what done actually means. Shared understanding means everyone involved, sponsors, team members, vendors, and end users, interprets goals and constraints in the same way. Without it, projects spiral into misinterpretation, rework, and finger-pointing. Outcomes of strong shared understanding include fewer loops of rework, faster and clearer decisions, and higher stakeholder confidence. The project manager's stance is that of a neutral facilitator, one who transforms vague statements into explicit, actionable agreements. On the PMP exam, this task often hides within stems about requirements conflicts or acceptance confusion. When shared understanding is missing, teams find themselves caught in cycles of "I thought you meant" conversations. A sponsor may approve requirements thinking one outcome will result, while the technical team builds something entirely different. The gap is not usually a lack of effort, but a lack of common reference. By focusing on explicit alignment, the project manager ensures everyone is working from the same foundation. The exam tests this subtly. When misaligned expectations appear, the correct response often involves clarifying and documenting agreements, rather than rushing into delivery or escalation. Shared understanding is not just about documents, though artifacts play a role. It is about the process of aligning people. The project manager facilitates conversations that surface assumptions, tests interpretations, and forces precision where ambiguity exists. Shared understanding is always a living construct, not a one-time achievement. As conditions change, the team revisits and refreshes its agreements. On the PMP exam, correct answers highlight this iterative nature, avoiding the trap of assuming a one-and-done agreement will survive shifting realities. Sustainable clarity requires continual engagement and visible reinforcement. Inputs to building shared understanding begin with the business case, which defines why the project exists. Scope statements, product backlog items, constraints, and known risks all feed into these conversations. Misalignment signals often appear as contradictory emails, conflicting interpretations of requirements, or surprise expectations voiced late. Phrases like "I assumed" or "I thought that meant" are red flags that clarity has slipped. Missing or conflicting definitions and vague acceptance criteria also point to danger. The project manager must recognize these signals early. On the exam, scenarios often disguise them, and the best answer involves pausing to confirm understanding rather than pressing ahead. Another signal of weak shared understanding is diverging visuals or models used by different groups. One team may use a process diagram, while another relies on a backlog, and stakeholders reference PowerPoint charts, all depicting the project differently. These inconsistencies fragment the shared vision and create confusion during decision-making. The project manager's role is to harmonize these representations, ensuring a single source of truth exists. On the exam, correct answers usually emphasize creating unified artifacts and confirming alignment across all groups, rather than tolerating inconsistent depictions of the same project. Capturing expectations and concerns explicitly also prevents drift. For example, a stakeholder who cares about customer satisfaction may frame requirements differently than one focused on regulatory compliance. Unless both are surfaced and reconciled, the team may inadvertently prioritize one over the other. Shared understanding requires making these priorities visible and subject to conscious agreement. PMI emphasizes that surprises late in a project usually trace back to missed signals early. On the exam, the right answer typically involves surfacing and documenting expectations now, not deferring alignment for later. Principles of shared understanding start with shared language. Glossaries, definitions of done, and definitions of ready prevent assumptions from creeping in. By repeating key terms twice and embedding them in artifacts, project managers make language a tool for clarity. Visual thinking also strengthens understanding. Context diagrams, story maps, and prototypes turn abstract concepts into concrete references. Testing understanding with examples and non-examples reinforces boundaries. For instance, showing both what counts as a valid order and what does not creates sharper clarity. On the exam, the correct answer usually emphasizes shared language and examples over vague statements. Bias breakers also matter in building shared understanding. People naturally infer meaning rather than confirm it, which creates risk. A good practice is to replace inference with confirmation. Here is what I understood. Does that match your intent? Similarly, asking what would success look like opens conversation that surfaces hidden assumptions. The PMP exam often rewards answers that stress confirmation rather than assumption. PMI's philosophy is clear. Clarify now, even if it takes more time, rather than create rework later. Explicit agreement is always safer than inferred alignment. The process of building shared understanding follows a structured sequence. First, elicit viewpoints from all relevant stakeholders, ensuring no voice is skipped. Next, synthesize these viewpoints into a draft articulation of goals, scope, and constraints. Then validate this draft using examples and acceptance tests, asking stakeholders to confirm explicitly. Once confirmed, capture agreements in visible artifacts and assign owners for ongoing stewardship. Finally, set a cadence for review and refinement as facts and constraints evolve. On the exam, correct answers often reflect this structure: elicit, synthesize, validate, capture, and refine, rather than improvisation. Elicitation is more than asking for requirements. It means actively listening, probing for assumptions, and encouraging diverse perspectives. A sponsor may articulate a goal differently than an end user, and reconciling those differences is critical. Synthesis then transforms scattered inputs into a coherent whole, avoiding the trap of treating stakeholder statements as separate requirements without alignment. Validation is where understanding is tested. Examples, prototypes, or walkthroughs make abstract commitments tangible. On the exam, correct answers usually emphasize facilitation of this process, not unilateral interpretation by the project manager. Capturing agreements in artifacts provides a reference point. For predictive projects, this might be a scope baseline, requirements traceability matrix, or acceptance criteria document. In agile contexts, backlog items with explicit acceptance criteria, plus a team-agreed definition of done, play the same role. Cross-mode artifacts like decision logs, glossaries, and working agreements help bridge communication. The most important element is ensuring there is a single source of truth, a visible location where the current, agreed understanding lives. On the exam, the best answer always involves updating or creating such artifacts to anchor alignment. Review cadence keeps shared understanding alive. Constraints shift, risks emerge, and stakeholders change over the life of a project. Regular reviews, whether in sprint ceremonies, stage gate reviews, or periodic alignment workshops, ensure the shared picture is refreshed. Refinement also includes adjusting definitions or acceptance criteria when conditions demand. Documenting these adjustments in decision logs preserves an audit trail and prevents backsliding into confusion. The PMP exam often presents scenarios where assumptions have shifted. Correct answers emphasize revisiting and refining shared understanding, rather than clinging to outdated agreements. Single sources of truth prevent fragmentation. Teams that rely on multiple conflicting documents or tools inevitably drift into disagreement. By ensuring there is one authoritative artifact, whether a scope baseline, backlog, or central repository, the project manager eliminates confusion. Shared understanding is not just about people nodding in agreement during a meeting. It is about documented, visible alignment that persists afterward. On the exam, correct answers highlight visible, traceable artifacts as anchors for shared understanding. PMI expects project managers to reinforce clarity with systems as well as conversations. In conclusion, building shared understanding transforms ambiguity into clarity and prevents costly rework. It begins with recognizing signals of misalignment and using principles like shared language, visual thinking, and bias-breaking confirmation. The process of eliciting, synthesizing, validating, capturing, and reviewing creates a sustainable structure for alignment. Artifacts such as baselines, backlogs, and decision logs serve as anchors, with review cadences ensuring they remain relevant. On the PMP exam, correct answers consistently favor approaches that emphasize structured facilitation, examples, validation, and documentation. Shared understanding is not an event, but a discipline that sustains alignment across the project lifecycle. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Agile and predictive approaches differ in how they build and maintain shared understanding, though both aim for the same result: clear, testable alignment. In Agile, understanding evolves through iterative demos, sprint reviews, and backlog refinement sessions. Each cycle tightens acceptance criteria, reducing ambiguity over time. Predictive projects, by contrast, seek to establish shared understanding earlier, baselining scope and acceptance criteria at the start. Changes are then managed through impact analysis and approvals. Hybrid contexts require balancing both protecting agile cadences while honoring predictive governance. On the exam, the best answers reflect tailoring. Agile relies on evolving artifacts, predictive on formal baselines, and hybrid on translating across the two. Regardless of mode, the principle remains: confirm before commit, document after agreement. Agile teams confirm shared understanding through examples in backlog items or stories. Predictive projects confirm via requirements, reviews, and sign-offs. In hybrid contexts, the project manager ensures backlog clarity is reconciled with governance documents so all parties are aligned. The PMP exam often embeds subtle cues. Phrases like sprint demo or stage gate point to the delivery mode. The correct answer is the one that ensures understanding is validated and documented in the right artifacts for that context. Techniques that support shared understanding often rely on simple, repeatable practices. One is the read-back method, where the project manager restates what they heard. I'm hearing that success means reducing errors by 20%. Did I miss anything? This invites correction and ensures alignment. Another technique is example-first acceptance criteria, often written in a given-when-then format. For example, given a logged-in user, when they submit a form, then they receive confirmation. This concreteness prevents ambiguity. On the exam, correct answers usually emphasize confirmation and examples rather than assumption or abstraction. Contrast pairs. Examples and non-examples are another powerful tool, showing both what meets acceptance and what does not. Clarifies boundaries. For instance, valid orders include those with approved payment. Invalid orders include those with expired cards. This dual framing ensures stakeholders see the scope from both sides. Another technique is the three-question close. What does success look like? What constraints matter most? How will acceptance be proven? These questions ensure shared understanding is testable, not vague. On the exam, scenarios often reward explicit validation through examples or contrast pairs, rather than trusting verbal agreements alone. These techniques also lend themselves to audio-friendly practices, which matter in distributed teams. Reading back, asking clarifying questions, and summarizing aloud ensure alignment even when stakeholders cannot see visual artifacts. This adaptability reinforces PMI's philosophy that shared understanding is about inclusive communication. The exam frequently tests whether candidates adapt collaboration methods to context audio calls, distributed teams, or face-to-face workshops. The best answers show flexibility while keeping clarity and validation intact. Consider a scenario. A quality assurance team rejects a feature, stating it does not meet acceptance criteria, while the sponsor insists it is good enough. The project manager faces a conflict rooted in lack of shared understanding. Options include shipping the feature immediately, escalating to the sponsor, facilitating an acceptance criteria review and updating artifacts, or adding silent extra tests. The best next action is to facilitate the criteria review, align stakeholders on definitions, update artifacts, and then proceed. On the exam, answers that emphasize facilitation and artifact updates usually align with PMI's expectations. In predictive contexts, this same scenario plays out through baselined artifacts. The scope baseline, requirements traceability matrix, and signed acceptance criteria provide the reference points for alignment. The project manager ensures disagreements are reconciled through formal governance channels rather than improvising. On the exam, predictive cues like sign-off or scope baseline point toward structured resolution. The principle remains the same. Clarify acceptance definitions and align stakeholders before proceeding, but the artifact differs by mode. Exam pitfalls around shared understanding often involve acting without clarifying acceptance criteria or scope intent. Another pitfall is assuming a prototype alone equals agreement. While prototypes are useful, they must be paired with explicit acceptance criteria and documented agreements. Updating artifacts after the fact is another common error, leaving audit trail gaps. Finally, skipping dissenting stakeholders to save time often backfires, creating resistance later. On the exam, these pitfalls appear as tempting distractors. The correct answer usually emphasizes inclusive validation, artifact updates, and transparency. A common trap is treating prototypes as substitutes for agreement. While stakeholders may nod during a demo, unless expectations are documented and artifacts updated, alignment remains fragile. PMI emphasizes that prototypes support understanding but do not replace formal agreement. On the exam, correct answers require combining prototypes with updated acceptance criteria, decision logs, or baselines. This reinforces the principle: shared understanding must be traceable and testable, not just informal. Skipping dissenting stakeholders is another trap. It may seem faster to bypass resistant voices, but doing so creates long-term risks. Those stakeholders often hold critical constraints, compliance, security, or operations, that can block delivery later. Engaging them early, even if it slows agreement, prevents costly surprises. On the exam, the correct answer nearly always involves inclusivity. PMI expects project managers to surface and address dissent rather than ignore it. Shared understanding is only real if all relevant voices have contributed. The quick playbook consolidates this task. Step 1. Define terms explicitly and use examples to illustrate them. Step 2. Validate aloud through readbacks, contrast pairs, or example-first acceptance criteria. Step 3. Capture agreements in a single source of truth scope baseline, backlog, or glossary with assigned owners. Step 4. Review on cadence, whether through retrospectives, stage gates, or governance reviews. Step 5. Change understanding only through policy impact analysis, approvals, or backlog prioritization. On the exam, answers that mirror this playbook clarity, confirmation, documentation, cadence are consistently correct. Clarity now is always better than speed that causes rework. It may take extra time to reconcile definitions, document agreements, or involve reluctant stakeholders, but these investments pay off in fewer disputes and smoother delivery later. PMI emphasizes this philosophy repeatedly. Alignment up front reduces risk downstream. On the exam, distractors often involve hasty shortcuts, such as ship now and fix later. The correct answers emphasize clarity, transparency, and inclusivity, even at the cost of short-term speed. In conclusion, building shared understanding means turning ambiguity into explicit, testable agreement. Agile, predictive, and hybrid projects use different artifacts, but the principles remain the same. Confirm before commit, document after agreement, and review continuously. Techniques such as readbacks, examples, and contrast pairs create clarity across diverse stakeholders. Pitfalls like skipping dissenters, assuming prototypes equal agreement, or updating artifacts late undermine alignment. On the PMP exam, correct answers consistently reflect PMI's philosophy: sustainable clarity, transparent documentation, and inclusive facilitation. Shared understanding is not a side activity, it is the foundation of predictable, confident delivery. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.